10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 325. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 325 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. My name is Nick Manella. I'm the host and creator of the show. If you're brand new, welcome in. If you're joining us once again, welcome back. So it's the fourth week of the month. You know what that means. It's time for our Tune of the Month episode. And of course, this month we are going to do a Charlie Parker tune, one of my favorites, Confirmation. And we're going to kind of wrap up the three different topics that we talked about this month within the Etude that I've created for you. But before we jump into the show, as usual, just wanted to remind you this is a listener-supported program, which means we do not do any advertisements. Instead, we rely on listeners just like you to support the show and keep it going. In the form of a small monthly donation, we use the Patreon platform, and in return for that donation, you do get a PDF to every single episode, audio examples, all kinds of fun stuff. So to find out how you can support the show, please go over to 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, get yourself signed up today. We have got some brand new patrons to shout out this week. Thank you to our new $5 patrons, Dick, Udo, Rachel, and Steve. And thank you to our new $3 patrons, D.A., Peyton, and Mike. Thank you guys so much for joining the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson family. Of course, to everybody that's supporting us for months or years, thank you. We could not do this show without you. And you are really the people that keeps this thing happening after 325 episodes. So again, that's 10minutejazzlesson.com. Click on one of the Patreon banners. Get yourself signed up today. All right, so let's dive into the tune Confirmation and the Etude that I have prepared for you. So what I'd like to do first is I'd like to, as usual, analyze the chord changes to Confirmation. This one is a little bit more complicated, but luckily it is an A-A-B-A tune. So even though there's a lot of information packed into every single measure in this composition, it repeats itself, which does make life a little bit easier. Now, this is one of those tunes where the melody is almost just as hard as the harmony. And to tell you the truth, in some ways, the melody is harder than playing over this tune. You know, after all the years I've spent playing this tune, the melody is still a really, really difficult thing for me to remember and to actually pull off cleanly, especially depending on the tempo. So this one's going to take a little bit of work, but let's talk about the harmony, because the harmony is generally what we cover here. And as I mentioned, it is a little bit complicated. So the tune is AABA, 32 bars, and it is in the key of concert F. So in the first bar, we get the 1 chord, F major 7. And then what happens in bars 2, 3, and 4 is we start a cycle of 2 5s that are eventually going to land in measure 5. So we're actually going to start this cycle of 2-5 progressions, short 2-5 progressions, starting on the 7 chord. So we're here, and then we just cycle down around the circle of fourths. And where we arrive is we land on the 4 chord, but it is dominant. So let's hear that cycle again from the beginning. So we get the 1 chord, and then we kick off that circle of fourths. Then we land on that dominant 4 chord for a measure. Then we move down a half step, and we're going to play a short 2-5 here. And that 2-5 is going to land on the 5 of 5 chord. And remember, another way to say 5 of 5 is it's a major 2, but we like to call it the 5 of 5. So we get a 2-5 into that. Then that 5 of 5 actually becomes a 2 chord by turning minor. And then we get a 2-5 back to the top. Back to the 1 chord, not the top. So while there is a lot of information in this very short 8 bars of music, it all makes sense. Most of it is a circle of fourths cycle, right? So that does ease the pain a little bit of playing this. So let's check out the entire A section. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there you go. That's the first 8 bars. Now, if we look at the second 8 bars, the only difference is in bar 15, we do not get that 5 of 5 chord. Instead, what happens is we start the 2-5 back to 1 right in that measure because we want to resolve that section before we go to the bridge. So check out on your PDF starting at measure 9 and check out how the chord progression is just a little bit different. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you see that gives us that closure before we go on to the bridge, before we go on to a different section. All right, so now looking at measure 17, where the bridge starts, it's pretty simple actually. The chords spread out a little bit, give us a nice difference between these fast moving chords in the A section, and we get a little bit of a break from that. So what we see is we see a long 2-5 to the key of the 4. So now we're going to concert B flat. And then what we do is we go to kind of an unrelated key. In measure 21, we're actually starting a 2-5 to the key of D flat concert, which is a really, really interesting sound. And then we see a 2-5 back into the last A section. And then the last A section is just like the second one. So let's hear the bridge one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's it. That's the whole tune. So yes, a lot of information. Yes, hard to play over. Yes, complicated. But if you really spend some time thinking about this tune and really studying it, it's actually not that hard to memorize the harmony. You probably have to spend a lot more time on the melody. All right, so now let's move on to the Etude. So what I did in the Etude was I took all 3 topics we talked about in parts 1, 2, and 3 of this series, and I put them in the Etude somewhere. Now, I'm not color coding them or pointing out where they are to you because that's your job, right? I've got to leave something for you to do. So what you want to do is you want to review those concepts that we talked about, you know, the triplets, the approach tones, the enclosures, and that specific thing we talked about where he uses the interval of a sixth. And I want you to find all the instances where I've used those and figure out how I put them in there and how I wove them in with my own lines. And I think this is the whole point of studying somebody else's playing, is that you want to take it, learn it, understand it, and kind of make it your own, which is what I've tried to do with this Etude. So let's check out the Etude. All right, so you can hear there's a lot going on in that Etude. It's a very, very busy one. So your job is to go through the Etude and find the instances of all those things we talked about in parts 1, 2, and 3. See if you can identify them. And then as you're playing through the Etude, think about how it sounds in the particular context that I'm using it in. And then maybe you can use the Etude as a model to start writing your own stuff and incorporating some of this Charlie Parker language into what you're playing. So let me know if you have any questions. I hope you enjoyed the Etude. I hope you enjoyed our little analysis of the tune Confirmation. One of my favorite tunes in the world and really difficult. I'm constantly working on this tune. Even though I learned it about 20 years ago, it requires a lot of maintenance to be able to play over this, which is totally fine because I love it. So just a reminder, you can find this Etude in all the keys over at our Patreon site. Go to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, get yourself signed up for that small donation every month, and you get a worksheet and audio examples to every single episode that we have ever done here on the show. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next week with another episode. Hope everybody's staying safe and healthy out there, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.